Welcome back to the show. Today, we are diving deep into a topic that has generated huge frustration, shattered dreams, and cost Australian home buyers billions. The opaque world of the property auction. If you've ever found yourself standing on a nature strip, heart pounding, convinced you had secured the perfect house based on the advertised price guide, only to watch it sell for figures that seemed utterly detached from reality, then you know this frustration intimately. You showed up ready to bid, feeling you could afford the property, and then watched it soar far beyond the advertised price. For too long, the system has felt rigged, a game where the cards are only revealed to the seller. But now, Victoria is attempting to change the rules of the game entirely. And in doing so, they are taking a significant step towards mandatory fairness and transparency, a move that is the first of its kind in Australia. The news dropped recently. Under new laws slated for introduction into state parliament next year, real estate agents in Victoria will be required to publish the seller's genuine reserve price at least 7 full days before a property is slated for auction. This isn't just bureaucratic tinkering. It's a direct attack on one of the most contentious, yet profitable, practices in the Australian real estate landscape: underquoting. Let's unpack what this means for buyers, agents, and the future of the housing market, and whether the rest of the nation should, or will, follow Victoria's groundbreaking lead. To understand the significance of this Victorian reform, we must first understand the problem it seeks to eradicate: underquoting. In simple terms, underquoting happens when a real estate agent advertises a property at a price that is significantly below the seller's true reserve price or market expectations. It is, and has been, illegal under federal consumer law, supplemented by specific state legislation. Yet, despite its illegality, it remains notoriously difficult to enforce. Why is enforcement so challenging? It hinges on a massive, systemic loophole. Reserve prices don't have to be made public. Under the current Victorian auction rules, agents are allowed to provide a price guide, a broad indication of expected value, but they are not mandated to disclose the actual seller's reserve price before the auction kicks off. Crucially, sellers are not even required to disclose their genuine reserve price to their own agents until auction day itself. This lack of mandated disclosure creates a perfect environment for illegal underquoting to flourish. By intentionally advertising the property below its true expected sale price, agents attract a massive crowd. Why would they want a massive crowd? Because a large audience creates the illusion of intense demand, which is the engine that drives up sale prices. The new law aims to close this specific loophole by requiring both sellers and agents to disclose the genuine reserve, the absolute minimum the seller is willing to accept, a full week before the hammer falls. This is designed to ensure buyers receive clearer signals about affordability and prevent the perpetuation of unrealistic expectations. The fundamental principle here is improving fairness and transparency for the consumer. Now, let's talk about why the auction format is so compelling, particularly when fueled by underquoting. It's not just about maximizing profit, it's about exploiting predictable human psychology. Auctions are immensely popular ways to sell property, particularly prevalent in Victoria, New South Wales, and the Australian Capital Territory. The primary driver of this popularity for sellers is clear: auctions create competitive tension. This tension frequently translates into substantially higher sale prices, especially when the market is booming. Furthermore, they offer certainty, a fixed date for the sale, assuming the reserve is met, and the process is openly transparent in real time. But for buyers, this competitive environment is a minefield of psychological traps. Behavioral economics offers powerful insights into how underquoting successfully fuels intense, often emotional, bidding. There are 3 key concepts at play here. 1. Anchoring. Buyers, when researching a property, anchor their expectations to the advertised price, even if that price is unrealistically low relative to the true market value. This low anchor sets their perceived starting point. When bidding begins, even if it quickly surpasses the anchor, the buyer's internal perception of value remains disproportionately influenced by that initial, low advertised price. They feel they're still close to the advertised figure, even if they have far exceeded it. 2. Loss aversion. This is a powerful human motivator. People hate losing something they perceive as already belonging to them more than they enjoy gaining something of equal value. As a bidding war heats up, buyers who have anchored to the low price and invested time and emotional energy into viewing the property are driven by loss aversion. They bid aggressively, not necessarily because the property is worth the extra money, but because they desperately want to avoid the crushing feeling of missing out after investing so much. 3. Herd behavior and the winner's curse. When large crowds show up at an auction, often attracted precisely by the low advertised price guide, this signals extraordinarily high demand. This crowd dynamic fuels herd behavior, amplifying the competitive pressure. This aggressive environment often leads directly to the dreaded winner's curse, the unfortunate phenomenon where the successful bidder ends up paying more for the property than its actual intrinsic market value. The current system, by allowing reserve prices to remain hidden, systematically exploits these psychological biases. Victoria's reform aims to temper this emotional bidding by injecting clarity, providing buyers with clearer signals about the true affordability threshold. What specific impact can we expect now that Victoria is moving to mandate reserve price disclosure 7 days out? The effects will likely be felt across 3 sectors: buyers, sellers, and agents. Impact on buyers and bidding behavior. For buyers, the immediate benefit is reduced uncertainty. Knowing the genuine minimum acceptable price will allow potential purchasers to establish affordability limits with greater certainty. This transparency should theoretically curb unrealistic expectations and temper some of the emotional last-minute bidding. Buyers will know, right up front, if the property is genuinely within their budget, reducing the instances of showing up only to be blindsided by a high reserve. Impact on sellers and reserve ambition. However, transparency is a double-edged sword. While it might calm the waters for buyers, it could incentivize sellers to be more ambitious. If sellers know their reserve price must be published, they might strategically set that reserve at a higher point. This could anchor buyer expectations higher than they might otherwise have been, potentially sustaining competitive pressure even without the element of surprise. It is important to note that the very act of disclosing the minimum acceptable price might set a new, higher perceived floor for the asset's value in the minds of the prospective purchasers, meaning bidding might start higher and stay competitive. Impact on real estate agents and compliance. Real estate agents face the most immediate operational changes. Underquoting, used as a strategic tactic to generate massive crowds and create that crucial competitive tension, will no longer be a viable marketing strategy. Agents will have to swiftly adjust their marketing and pricing strategies to comply with the new requirements. This change inevitably means that compliance costs may increase. Furthermore, the stakes are now significantly higher. Agents could face stiff penalties if they fail to disclose the genuine reserve price, ensuring they adhere strictly to the new transparency mandates. The era of using misleading price guides to lure bidders is officially coming to an end in Victoria. While this move by Victoria is a monumental step toward improving fairness, we must be realistic about its limitations. The question inevitably arises, will mandatory reserve disclosure fix the housing affordability crisis? The evidence suggests that while auctions may become more rational and the psychological manipulation reduced, the overall impact on macro-level price levels is likely to be limited. Why? Because house prices are dominated by structural drivers. These are the fundamental, overarching forces that govern supply and demand, regardless of how transparent the transaction process is. These forces include 1. Supply constraints. The difficulty and slowness of bringing new housing stock to market, particularly in established high-demand areas. 2. Population growth. Consistent high demand, especially in major urban centers like Melbourne, fueled by strong population growth. 3. Interest rates. The cost of borrowing money, which dictates purchasing power and overall market accessibility. These structural factors will continue to dominate overall price trends. In high-demand areas, Even if the auction process is conducted with perfect transparency and reduced emotional bidding, prices are likely to remain high simply because demand fundamentally outstrips supply. As noted by the experts, while the reform significantly improves consumer transparency, on its own, it cannot solve the broader housing affordability challenges rooted deeply in these complex market forces. It treats the symptoms of price inflation caused by behavioral bias, but not the underlying market disease of limited supply and high demand. Victoria has established itself as the pioneer in this regulatory domain, making this move a first for Australia. But will the other major auction markets, New South Wales and Queensland, adopt this model? Currently, there is no clear indication that other states are rushing to implement Victoria's reserve price disclosure model. Each state appears to be tackling the issue of pricing transparency with slightly different philosophical approaches, reflecting the decentralized nature of consumer protection law enforcement in property transactions across the country. New South Wales, focusing on accurate guides. NSW is focused primarily on tightening penalties for underquoting. Their approach emphasizes the need for accurate price guides, rather than mandating the disclosure of the reserve price itself. The regulatory focus in NSW seems centered on ensuring that the advertised price range genuinely reflects the seller's expectations and the agent's appraisal, reinforcing accuracy in the guide, but preserving the mystery of the specific reserve number until the auction. This represents a subtle but significant philosophical difference from Victoria's approach. Queensland, banning price guides altogether. Queensland's policy philosophy presents a completely opposite strategy. Rather than adding new disclosure rules, such as revealing the reserve price, Queensland tends to favor banning price guides entirely for properties being sold via auction. The logic here is arguably to remove the temptation for anchoring or underquoting altogether by preventing the seller or agent from setting any pre-auction price expectation. This forces buyers to rely purely on their own research and appraisals of market value, potentially neutralizing the behavioral economic traps associated with low advertised guides. The lack of immediate movement suggests that the nation is currently observing Victoria's bold experiment. If Victoria sees a substantial reduction in buyer dissatisfaction, fewer legal challenges related to underquoting, and a smoother, more rational auction process, it could certainly pressure other states to reconsider their current strategies. However, given the entrenched, contrasting policies already in place in NSW and Queensland, immediate harmonization seems unlikely. The decision by Victoria's government is fundamentally about improving the consumer experience and establishing a clearer standard for fairness. By requiring the disclosure of the genuine reserve price, the minimum acceptable amount, 7 days prior to the auction, the law effectively eliminates the ability of agents to use price concealment as a predatory marketing tool. We are moving away from a system where buyers are lured to auctions under false pretenses, only to discover too late that the property was always destined to sell significantly higher. This reform grants buyers essential information needed to make rational decisions, reducing the chance that they fall victim to aggressive, emotionally charged bidding driven by misleading anchors and the fear of missing out. It will force the market to operate on the basis of genuine market value and transparent expectations, rather than manufactured competitive tension. For sellers, it means they must now commit to their minimum price much earlier, removing the spontaneity that sometimes characterized the old system. For agents, it means an adjustment towards professionalism and meticulous compliance, with the threat of penalties for non-disclosure looming large. While this policy alone won't solve the immense challenge of housing affordability, that battle requires tackling the structural giants of supply and interest rates. It represents a crucial victory for consumer protection and ethical property transactions in Australia. It shifts the burden of certainty onto the seller and the agent, giving power back to the buyer. The Victorian reform is essentially installing guardrails on a high-stakes competitive race. The speed of the race, the price, might still be dictated by market forces, the structural drivers, but at least now, everyone knows exactly where the finish line is, the reserve price, before they even start running. This clarity is invaluable. We will continue to track how these new laws affect the dynamics of the Victoria market and whether they ultimately spark a national regulatory harmonization focused on transparency. That's it for today's deep dive. Thank you for joining me. If you've enjoyed this discussion on the complexities of property reform and behavioral economics, be sure to hit subscribe button.